right. Well, hello, everyone. I am excited to have the opportunity to speak with Chandler and Paul today. Chandler is a PRS Global Client Service Manager, so he links up great internationally educated individuals with U.S. health systems. And Paul is a nurse who was very successful with getting a position at a well-known large university hospital. And so we get asked all the time, what are some tips to prepare? What are some tips to do really well when you interview? And I can't think of two better people than Chandler and Paul to give some of that advice to everyone. So without delaying any further, let's jump in. Chandler, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. And so good to be with you guys today. We've identified probably 5 best practices for candidates, especially going into a client interview. And we'll kind of work through those kind of one by one. And we'll even get Paul's expertise on this since he has been successful in the client interview. The first best practice that we always tell applicants to do is to do research. Facilities are going to be very impressed whenever you've done your due diligence coming into that interview. Whenever you can share, oh, I saw this on the website, or I saw this on your Facebook page or your Instagram page, it's going to give you a leg up. The clients really love to see that engagement, and it also is going to be a benefit to you. Paul, I'm sure you probably did a little bit of research into the facility that you went to prior to your interview, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I did really lots of research. And that is one of the important tips that I would like to share to the future applicants of PRS. You have to do your research in the healthcare facility that you are applying for. You really need to know your healthcare facility. I even recommend that before you attend the interview, check the website of the hospital and also check the mission or the goal of the healthcare organization. Look into their core values. I also recommend for you to research on the job description of the nursing position that you are applying for, because this mission, values, and the job description can be the basis of your talking points during the interview.
That's awesome. You even get the mission and vision. I love that.
Diving deep into it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, as Paul just mentioned, always do your research. It's going to put you at an advantage too to know exactly what you're getting into. The second thing I would say is to make sure that you arrive early. So when you arrive early, you're going to be able to prevent all of the nuances whenever you're doing an interview over internet, right? Sometimes there's Wi-Fi issues, sometimes the lighting's bad, sometimes there's kids running around in the background. So making sure that you arrive, even 10 to 15 minutes early, it's going to let you settle in and be prepared for that interview. And Paul, I know that you arrived early to your interview, and I'm sure you'd probably share that with other applicants too.
Yeah, I arrived 50 minutes before the interview just to make sure that everything is okay. That is right. I totally agree, sir.
Awesome.
Great.
So yeah, the third point I would say, and this is something that oftentimes applicants may have a difficult time with, but it's just portraying or to be confident, right? It's not a bad thing to brag on yourself and to brag on the experience that you have and the accomplishments that you've reached. So don't be scared to talk about your areas of expertise and what you've learned up to this point. Paint that picture of how you could be a great asset to the facility that you're applying for. And also, I would just say too that in your confidence, you can actually talk about even some of the areas that you want to improve in. And that gives the health facility a good map for making sure that you're trained in the areas that you want to be trained in. So, Paul, I know was great in that. And Paul, anything that you'd like to share on that?
Yeah. Another advice that I can share: be yourself during the interview. Bring your own unique personality with you. For example, if you are a guy with a good sense of humor, so bring it on the table. If you are the cool guy and calm guy, bring it on. Or if you are I'm the best, I'm the number one, I'm the top of everything. So just, bring it on. Remember that your personality can add so much in a certain unit. You are a wonderful person. let your own version of yourself shine during the interview. And in my opinion, managers want to see your authentic personality, and they really want to know who actually they are hiring. So just be comfortable in your own if in your own skin, guys. So that is one of the recommendations that I can give. Another advice, another tip, you can ask questions to the interviewer. You are being interviewed and you are interviewing them too. Remember that your future healthcare facility will be your second home. You will be spending the next 3 years with them, so it's also important to know if that healthcare facility really fits your priorities. The usual questions that I ask: the transition program for foreign nurses, the nurse-patient ratio of the unit that I am applying for, the assistance that they can extend to the education of my kids, job opportunities for my spouse who is also a nurse, and the education support that they can offer. And I agree with you. You have to be confident during the interview. Don't let your nerves get the best of you. Nurses, it's typical to get nervous, especially in the first 5 minutes of the interview. It is expected to be scared when you are in front of a panel of interviewers. And you know what? They know that. They are expecting that you are a bit anxious. They were in your shoes before. So just trust yourself, trust the process, and do your best to keep your cool.
Yeah, I love that, Paul. And I agree with you that first 5 minutes is always kind of the hardest, like, right? Is there anything that you did right before the interview or during those first couple minutes that helped calm you down?
I just take a deep breath,
Uh,
and it helped me a lot. So maybe other nurses can do that as well.
yeah, there are a lot of breathing techniques, and that definitely helps to kind of calm the system. And then the other thing that I'll share is the hospital or SNF that's interviewing, they're so excited to just have time with you and to learn about you. And, a lot of times I think it's less of the technical, but they just want to connect with the candidate and really learn more about them. And so, Paul, when you shared, like, be yourself, whoever that was, and you gave some great examples, and I'd be curious on who you brought to the table. But that's so true. Like, bring your personality, bring who you are. Being authentic it really does make a difference.
I would even say that, many of our facilities and clients, Cara, I know you've heard this, is that they say it's the highlight of their week getting to talk to our applicants.
It
So
really is.
those first 5 minutes, like Paul said, it can be nerve wracking. It can be a little intimidating perhaps, but just know that there's an excitement on the other side of the world for this interview to take place. And so that should give you some peace of mind. I would just say the fifth and final thing, as far as a best practice for candidates, just manage expectations before going into an interview. So making sure that you know the process from your pre-screen process to the matching process to the actual client interview, and then things that happen afterward. That confidence is going to give you peace of mind to know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. So for example, if you've had an interview and you've just gotten done, rest assured that within the next 24 hours, you're going to get an answer either way of whether you've passed or not. Some clients will even be able to extend an offer. We're talking within 15 minutes after an interview's been done. So understanding those expectations and knowing that the offer that's given to you has gone through a thorough examination to take in consideration your years of experience, your education, your trainings, things like that, to make sure that you're compensating accordingly. And knowing those things is going to give you a lot of confidence, not just before, but also after, while you await the offer.
That's great. That's excellent. On the ask questions, because the asking questions is really important, right? To be able to come with questions. Chandler, have you heard, are there certain questions that nurses ask that you're like, well, that was a good question during an interview?
I think one of the biggest ones, and it'd be a question that would be on the forefront of my mind, is like, how are you going to be committed to me as an applicant throughout this process. So what does that day one look like? What is that 30-day progression, 90-day progression? And just understanding that you have a part in this facility, right? I think a lot of nurses, there's an anxiety making a 3-year commitment. They don't want to go to some place and there be ambiguity about whether or not they're going to have career advancement opportunities or how they're going to be supported. So I think really fleshing that out, asking the facility is a great question to be sure.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Paul, anything else you would recommend? Yeah, what else do you recommend?
In my opinion, managers in the United States love to ask behavioral questions. These are the type of questions which would give them an idea on how you as a nurse react or respond in a stressful situation. I believe that the best way to answer these behavioral type of questions is using the STAR interview method. Remember, in the interview, you are the center of the interview process. So you are the superstar, so might as well use the STAR method. STAR method is actually an acronym for situation, task, action, and results. Example of that, specific example of that behavioral question, they may ask you about a conflict that you have encountered in your facility. So using that STAR, perhaps you have to first think of the situation or time that you had a conflict, maybe with a colleague, a nurse, a physician, or even a patient, for example. Then think of the actions that you have done to navigate in this conflict. What did you do? Did you talk with that person? Did you do confrontation to resolve the issue? Tell your story, and then finish off by telling what are the results of those actions. Was it successful? What's the conclusion? What's the outcome? So you have to tell your story to them using the STAR format to show your future manager that you are really competent in dealing with this stressful situation in the hospital. And another thing, which is very important, when you encounter this behavioral question, think at the back of your mind, what is the reason why they are asking me that question? What does he want from me? Does he want to know my managerial skills? Is it my conflict management skills? Once you figure it out, then you have the target to focus on.
Yeah, I love that because it's okay that there was a situation there. It's okay that you've had conflicts. Everybody has had conflicts in the past, right? And you're right. They're just looking at how do you handle that when that does happen. I love the STAR analogy or that framework. That's fantastic. Those are good nuggets, Paul.
Yeah, I want to say, I think after listening to Paul, I could go pass a nurse interview now, right? So, those are fantastic tips. Thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah, that was really good. Anything else either of you can think of that you would want to share with somebody who's preparing for an interview?
They always ask about weaknesses. Based on my experience attending panel of interview, they always ask about weaknesses. So just a quick tip, do not say that you don't have a weakness. Everyone has. You can search on the internet on the weaknesses that you can bring up during the interview. My go-to weaknesses that I always mention when being asked is my type A personality, which makes me juggle several tasks at once. And as a result, I have a hard time balancing everything. I really like to mention this weakness because, okay, it's a weakness, but it also shows that you are, a highly motivated individual and a person who wants to take charge or lead. So that is very important. Another piece of advice about weakness, make sure that the weakness that you are going to tell your interviewer is out, not in the job description. If I'm applying for an entry-level nurse, for example, I might say that, my weakness is public speaking. It's a subtle weakness because an entry-level nurse do not require public speaking, right? So you always, show the two sides of the coin.
Yeah. That is good advice. All right. Wow. This is, I mean, I am sure all the listeners are like, hey, I got to get that down. I got to get that down. These are good tips. And obviously, Paul, you were very successful with getting a interview and then being offered the position. So thank you. Anything else you want to share to our viewers before we end today?
You know, one thing I would just say, whenever you are asking those questions, make sure you vet those questions. Maybe think through it a couple of times, like, okay, should I ask that? Sometimes, depending on the facility, they may be rubbed the wrong way if you're asking very specific details about pay and, you know, things like that. So some of those questions you can save for after the interview with the PRS Global Representative, and we'll talk through some of those benefits. But I would just make sure, you know, to when you think about those questions, make sure that they're pertinent to your immigration journey and what your job would be like in the U.S. So that's one thing I would just say, because sometimes somebody can do a great job through the interview and they ask a question that the facility kind of doesn't take the right way and could result in a negative response. So just want to share that tip as well.
Yeah, that's good tips. So do you recommend asking about the salary or waiting till afterwards on that until they get offered?
I would wait till after, and kind of going back to that managing expectations, just know that your offer that's given to you is going to be based off of your years of experience. It's going to be based off of the cost of living in the area. So it is going to be competitive in that sense. And it's always easy to compare offers from one place to another, but just don't want to get too much into the weeds on that. So I would just refrain from asking that question. And you can ask that once you receive your offer from PRS.
Yeah, that's a whole nother Facebook Live, right, on how to look at offers and cost of living and all of that. That's great. Well, Chandler and Paul, it was such a pleasure to have some time with you both. And Paul, thank you for just sharing your experience and how you prepared for the interview, and which resulted in great success. And I know you're getting eager to get on over here and start, and we'll be excited to have you here in the United States soon. But thank you for sharing all of your nuggets and your intel with everyone. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and we will see you next time.